In this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to crochet a flower granny square. We're going to start our granny square with a magic ring. You can use any method you like, but I recommend a double magic ring as it's more secure than a normal magic ring. To make a double magic ring, wrap your yarn around your first finger 3 times like this. Then place your middle finger next to your first to hold those wraps in place. Now get your crochet hook, put it under the first 2 wraps, grab the 3rd wrap with your hook and pull it under. Now we've created our double magic ring, so gently remove it from your finger. So the double magic ring is more secure than a normal magic ring because we have 2 strands of yarn that make up the magic ring. This does mean there's an extra step to close the magic ring, but I will take you through it once we get there. Let's move on to round 1. To start round 1, chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. This chain 4 counts as a double crochet plus 1 chain. That's a double crochet in US terms. They're called trebles in the UK. I use US terms in my tutorials. Next, make a double crochet into the magic ring, ensuring we catch both of those strands of yarn that make up the magic ring with our hook. So I'll show you what that looks like. Yarn over, hook into the magic ring under both of those loops, yarn over, pull up a loop. You should now have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So that was a US double crochet. Next, chain 1. Then make another double crochet into the magic ring. Next, chain 1, and we're going to repeat those 2 steps all the way around until we've made a total of 7 double crochets and 7 chain 1 spaces, not including our starting chain. So continue doing that, a double crochet and then a chain 1 until you've done 7, and then come back to this tutorial. So as you can see, I've made a total of 7 double crochets and 7 chain 1s, not including our starting chain. If we do include our starting chain, if you remember, that counts as a double crochet plus 1, we've made a total of 8 double crochet and 8 chain 1 spaces. It's now time to close up that double magic ring. So this is where some people can have difficulty with the double magic ring. So those 2 strands there, we're going to watch them carefully whilst we pull on our yarn tail. One of them will start to tighten and we need to grab it. So watch those 2 strands of yarn. You see that's the one that's moving there. So we're going to grab it and pull it. And what that does is that tightens up the other loop first. So I'm pulling on it here. I'm going to use my thumb and middle finger to pinch my crochet, and I'm going to pull until I can't pull anymore. And as you can see, that's completely gotten rid of that 2nd strand of yarn. It's nice and hidden. So I can just pull on my tail now to get rid of this loop here. And we've got a beautiful centre to our granny square. As the centre is the weakest point of a granny square, I strongly recommend that when you come to weave this end in, you weave it in really firmly and ideally around that centre to give it some more reinforcement. To finish off round 1, we're going to slip stitch in the 3rd chain. Now with the double magic ring, our first chain gets quite tight down here. So that there is actually our first chain, 2nd chain, 3rd chain, 4th chain. So I'm slip stitching in the first chain, and I like to go under 2 loops here, so I go in the chain there to make a slip stitch. We're now ready to fasten off and join our next colour for round 2. So chain 1, snip your yarn, leaving an end long enough to come back and weave in later. Use your crochet hook to pull that yarn end through the chain we just made. Give it a pull to tighten. We've now secured our orange yarn and we're ready to join the colour for the petals of our flower. So I've pulled up the end of this magenta colour and I'm going to join it to any chain one space. It doesn't matter which one you choose here. I like to go at the opposite side of where I've just fastened off, so I've got more space to weave my tails in later. So I'm going to put my hook in the chain one space there. From this point forward in the granny square, we usually work in our chain spaces. And I'm going to take my next colour yarn and lay it over the top of my crochet hook, making sure I've left a tail long enough to weave in later. Then use your hook to pull up a loop of yarn. I have a trick here to stop this chain coming loose before we get a chance to weave our end in, and it just creates a bit more friction with our yarn. So take your yarn tail, put it over the top of your crochet hook and tuck it down out of the way. We're now going to ignore that loop of yarn. It will get caught in our first chain and that will give a bit of extra friction here, so this chain is less likely to come loose before we can come and sew our ends in. So next, chain 2. 1, 2. This counts as something called a partial double crochet. So if I grab one of these squares I made earlier, so the petals of this flower are made up of something called a cluster stitch. Specifically, this cluster stitch here is a 4 double crochet cluster stitch, and it's made up of 4 partial double crochets joined together at the top into a cluster. If that sounds complicated, don't worry, I'm going to go through it step by step. The important thing to know is that our first cluster, so it's actually this one here, you can see the starting chain here, is slightly different to the other 7 clusters of our flower petals. So we're now going to make 3 partial double crochets in the same chain 1 space, and I'm going to take you through that step by step. So yarn over, put your hook into the chain space, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. We've now made a partial double crochet. We need to make 2 more. So yarn over, put your hook into the space, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, put your hook into the same space, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. So you should now have 4 loops on your crochet hook. To finish off our first cluster stitch, yarn over and pull through all 4 loops. As you can see, by joining those partial stitches together at the top with a yarn over and pull through, it brings them to a point that looks a bit like a flower petal. Next, chain 2. 1, 2. We're going to make another cluster stitch of 4 partial double crochets in the next chain 1 space. Let's work it together. Yarn over, put your hook into the chain 1 space, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, put your hook into the same space, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, put your hook into the same space, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, put your hook into the same space, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. This time you should have 5 loops on your hook, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 4 partial double crochets into the same space. To finish off this stitch, yarn over and pull through all 5 loops on your crochet hook. That's our next cluster stitch done. So we're going to repeat these steps all around our flower, working 2 chains, 1, 2, then a cluster stitch in the next chain 1 space. So 4 partial double crochets, that's 1 partial, 2 partial double crochets, 3 partial double crochets, and 4 partial double crochets. Now yarn over and pull through all 5 loops on your hook, chain 2 and continue repeating around until you have a total of 8 cluster stitches and 8 chain 2 spaces, and you're ready to fasten off this round. And I'll meet you here because I have a bit of a trick to show you how to fasten off neatly with a cluster stitch. So I'm almost at the end of the round and I've made 8 petals, so 8 cluster stitches and 8 chain 2 spaces, and I've just done my last chain 2 space after my last cluster. I strongly recommend double checking that you've definitely got 8 of everything here, otherwise the next round will not work. So my trick for finishing off a round with a cluster stitch is usually we would slip stitch under both loops at the top of a stitch when we fasten off a round, something like that. But to make your cluster stitch look a little bit more like the other cluster stitches in the round that don't have that chain 2 start, I'm actually going to slip stitch in some back loops. So I recommend putting your crochet hook in that space there, and at the back of your work try to pick up at least 2, preferably 3 loops there. And that's where you make the slip stitch, and I think this just gives a slightly neater finish to our clusters. Now fasten off just like we did at the end of round 1. So you might notice at this point that your flower cups a little bit like this, but don't worry, on the next round those chain 2 spaces get quite stretched and your square will lie flat after the next round. So before we start round 3, join your colour just like we did at the start of row 2. So I'm going in any chain space here, laying my yarn over my crochet hook and pulling up a loop. Then I'm going to do that trick of laying my tail over the top of my crochet hook and tucking it down there out of the way, ready to be caught in our first chain. Now we're ready for round 3. Start round 3 with a chain of 3. 1, 2, 3. This counts as our first double crochet stitch. Now work 2 more double crochets into the same space. So 1 double crochet and 2 double crochets. We're then going to skip the next cluster and into the next chain 2 space, work 3 half double crochets. So if you've not come across a half double stitch before, I'll show you how we do it. So yarn over, put your hook into the next space, yarn over, pull up a loop. You should now have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops like that. That is a half double crochet. They're called half trebles if you prefer UK terms. Now we're going to work 2 more half double crochets into the same space. 1, 2. So we've made 3 half doubles into that space. Into the next space we're going to make something called a corner group. So the corner groups for this square are actually the same as a traditional granny square. So we're going to make 3 double crochets, 2 chains, 3 double crochets, all into the same chain 2 space. So 1 double crochet, 2 double crochets, and 3 double crochets. Then 2 chains for the corner space, 1, 2, then 3 more double crochets back into the same chain 2 space, 1, 2, 3. Then into the next chain 2 space work 3 half double crochets, 1, 2, 3. Then into the next space work that corner group of 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets. Then in the next chain 2 space 3 half double crochets. So repeat that 2 more times, and I'll meet you back around here to finish off this final corner. So I've repeated that around my square and I've just done my last group of 3 half double crochets. So the next space already has 3 double crochets of our corner group. So we're going to finish off this corner by working 3 double crochets back into that chain 2 space that where we started the round. 1, 2, 3. Then if you want to finish your granny square here after 3 rounds, then chain 2 and then you can finish off with a slip stitch into the top of that starting chain or an invisible join if you prefer a seamless finish. For my sample squares, I actually added a 4th round, and the great thing about this granny square pattern is for round 4, it's exactly the same as a traditional granny square, and you can repeat that over and over and over again for as big as you want your square to be. If you've never made a traditional granny square in one colour before, I'll link my tutorial for that over here, and I'll also link a playlist over here of all different ways of joining granny squares for when you come to join your granny squares together into a project. I'll see you again next week for another tutorial.